the Sixers are going to get most of their guys back. The only guy who's still out is Curry, right?
Yes, that's what I believe so, yeah. So everyone else, it's Ferguson, Matisse Thybulle, Tobias Harris, and who am I missing? Shake Milton? Those are the guys back?
Yep. So the Sixers are definitely going to have a much different look, more depth. It was fun getting to watch, Isaiah Joe get a couple of minutes.
I think he earned himself a little bit more minutes whenever the place comes up in a game.
Shot about 40% from three.
Yeah, and he was also being talked about defensively. I'm telling you, it's a little Furcon slide down the bench, buddy. Isaiah Joe might be sliding
your
in.
Boy Furky.
Don't even get me started.
Keith Smith covers the NBA, Yahoo Sports, Real GM, and he joins us now here on the Sports Bash on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. He's at Keith Smith NBA. Let's get his thoughts on, man, what did we see yesterday, Keith? I know right around 3 o'clock, 3:30, it looked like Ben Simmons was going to be a Rocket and James Harden was going to be a Sixer. How close do you think it got, and why ultimately is James Harden in Brooklyn and not Philadelphia?
I think the answer is it got relatively close. I think what we ultimately saw happen with the 76ers is when the asking price got to be something along the lines of Simmons plus Maxey plus Thybulle plus picks, that's where Daryl Morey said, whoa, hold on. Maybe we can do Simmons plus something there, but we're not doing all of that. And I think that's where they stepped out. That's where the Nets fully stepped in and said, all right, we're going all in. We're going to make this happen. We're going to do, all the picks you could possibly want. We're going to send you players. We'll do all that. And that's ultimately why we landed where we landed with the trade.
So, we were earlier in the show kind of like, look, Daryl Morey knows James Harden. And if at the end he just said, look, it's not worth it for me, I trust his thought process of saying, but in the end, did he just get outbid by Brooklyn?
I don't think he got outbid. My guess is there was a point where he walked away because of everything that was, rumored in those talks from both Philadelphia and Brooklyn side. Ben Simmons is far and away the best piece in that mix. He's a really good player. He's an all-star level guy. He's young. He's locked up under contract for several years. So I think, you have to be in a position where you walk away from that versus being something where you get outbid there. And I think it just got to be too much for Philadelphia. And you're absolutely right. Nobody knows and supports James Harden more than Daryl Morey does. And if he's walking away, that should raise some eyebrows for everybody else.
Woj and Chris Haynes have recently mentioned Tillman not wanting to deal with Daryl Morey, considering, their past relationship. How much stock do you maybe put into that philosophy on why the trade didn't go down?
Yeah, I think there might have been a sense there. If they're going to get him, they're going to overpay to do it. And I think it might have been one of those where I'm going to punish him, if you will, in that way. And I think that might be where, again, Daryl Morey looks at it and says, okay, yeah, good luck. You have fun making your other trade. I'm walking away here.
Keith, obviously, you're talking about Ben Simmons being the best piece. Well, we just played a bunch of calls from our listeners who are ready to get rid of him, which I'm not, advocating. I'm just saying there's a lot of frustration between around Ben, that his game has not evolved. He's still the same player. Apparently, though, Doc really likes him and thinks that he can get more out of him. So do you think that Doc Rivers had a little bit of a factor here by saying, look, let me keep working with this guy and I can get more? Or if you're watching Ben Simmons, are you saying, look, I understand why the fans are frustrated and it's time to maybe move on and see if they can get a different piece?
I'm going to, kind of do something to do to you guys regularly, and I'm going to say it's a bit of both. I think Doc Rivers probably said, hey, here's what I think we can get out of them. It's a weird season to start. These 10, 11 games or whatever, I don't know how much we can take from these. It's nice that Philadelphia won a bunch of them and beat up on some bad teams. But, they're now dealing with their own COVID stuff, and there's just a lot of weird stuff going on with this year. So I think what you're kind of looking at in this position is if Doc feels like, hey, I can really get this guy in a position where he can defend, he can make plays, he can do the things I need him to do for us to be a great team, then you move along that way, and that's how you feel pretty good about it. Now, from the flip side, I can understand that frustration. I can understand the sense of, boy, this guy just doesn't give us enough. I feel like we should be getting more out of him. I can fully understand where the fans are coming from, but I think you hit a point where it's, what more do you want? He's already one of the best defenders in the league. He's certainly, if not the most versatile defenders. He's right near the top. He's one of the better playmakers. He can score. He's just not a shooter, and he's never going to be a shooter. So I start to, really question, how far do we really need to go before, he's already good enough, and that's, plenty good enough for us as a team.
How do you think this impacts Ben himself? There's reports that he's ecstatic that he's staying in Philadelphia. Ideal world, you're a professional and you prove everybody wrong. I don't know if that's necessarily how it's going to go. So, how do you think this impacts Ben moving forward?
Yeah, I think there is a chance he is, pretty happy. I don't think he would have been, overly thrilled to go to a Houston team that's heading in a little bit of a different direction, that is has an owner that a lot of people aren't real high on. There's a big question to how committed he is to winning and spending the money to win and those kind of things. So I think there is, a little bit of a, question there. So I'm sure he's happy from that side. But yeah, you hope that is the thing. But, Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers probably had to have some difficult conversations at points over the last day or so where it was, all right, here's what happened, here's where we're at. And you do hope that eventually everybody understands, hey, it's the NBA. Your name's going to come up if you're even a good player. I had a GM tell me a couple years ago, if a guy's name is never mentioned in trade talks, that guy needs to think about how quickly he can get into coaching or TV.
Keith Smith covers the NBA, Yahoo Sports. Let me ask you about the fact now that Harden is with the Nets. Does that make them the clear favorite to you? And if so, does that mean that Philly, Milwaukee, Miami, Boston have to figure out what their big move's going to be?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily. I thought the Nets were already pretty good, and I think they're still pretty good. I don't know how much this really changes things for them. They don't have any kind of front court depth at all now. It's really DeAndre Jordan, and that's about it. They've got Jeff Green, but he's only kind of a pseudo center. So I worry a little bit from that standpoint. How are you going to make that work? Well, what are you going to do here? Because we've still got 60 some odd games to play in this regular season that you got to get through before you even get to the playoffs. Now they've got tools that they can still build out the roster with, and they're in a position where you've got open roster spots, so they're not done. So let's see how they fill it out. But I think Milwaukee's right there. I think Philadelphia, all the teams you mentioned, I think should still feel pretty good. Because the other thing is, how in the world are the Nets going to stop anybody? Well, they're going to score a lot of points.
You brought that. You bring that up, Keith. You watch the Sixers play. I mean, when Jarrett Allen's in there, and they're still small, but holy mackerel! I feel like Embiid could score 50 against them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he does. But when they play again, I don't know when that'll be. But yeah, if you can score a ton of points. But we see the all-time great offenses when it gets to the playoffs. Everything slows down, becomes more of a grind. Now, you feel pretty good that I have Durant, Harden, and Irving. They can go create me a bucket almost out of nowhere if need be, but I just don't know how they're going to get enough stops when it really matters.
How do you view this Kyrie situation? Look, I don't have an issue with someone needing time for personal reasons and things of that nature, but it's clear that it's dysfunctional and it's because of him.
Yeah, there is. I said this, and I don't know if we talked about it last week or not, so I apologize if I'm repeating. I was not going to criticize Kyrie at all if it was everything that was going on in the world. If he felt like, look, this isn't the right time right now, I need to step away for a little bit. Fully understood, fully supported. But when you start doing things like showing up at birthday parties with masks on, and I don't want to hear the whole, sometimes you just need to be around family stuff. Being around family can be sitting home and watching a movie or playing a board game. It doesn't have to be at a party with 100 people without a mask on. Then, missing a game to be on a Zoom meeting and the like, even if it is a good cause, I don't know. And you can tell Sean Mark's statement to the media today, you can tell he is supportive but aggravated. And I think that's the best way to describe it. I had someone tell me who's, kind of watching the situation in the league, what their response was. something just doesn't feel right with this. That's got to get figured out here sooner rather than later. And I think, that's the tough part right now. And I think that was probably part of the motivation to get the Harden trade done is the Nets know, hey, we've got a chance to have a really special season here. We don't want to miss out on it because we have this guy who's kind of gone AWOL on us.
Keith Smith covers the NBA, and of course, the Sixers take on the Heat tonight here on 97.3 ESPN. The coverage begins at 7 o'clock. I want to ask you an outside perspective about Embiid. Do you see a different Embiid? Do you see a guy who seems a little bit more focused, a little bit more locked in, or do you still not – I have said in the past that I think Embiid can be the best player on a team that wins a championship. He's just not ready. Does he look like he has taken another step or that next step when you see him now?
He does. He doesn't look remarkably different physically, but you could tell he's in better shape as far as his conditioning goes. He's playing deeper into these games. I look at those games where they were down so many guys, and he played, and I thought, he did really well, all the way through. Like, look at that playoff series last year in the bubble. He got in there, and what ended up happening was Boston was like, great, let him get 1 million touches and score 20 points in the first quarter and go off, because he'll be dead by the time halftime rolls around, and he'll be done in the second half, and that's exactly how it played out. So I think what you're seeing now is conditioning is better, but you hit the key word there. I think his focus is as good as it has ever been, and I think what you're seeing now with Joel Embiid is I think he's come out with this mindset of, for 4 quarters a night, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to be, the guy who carries us, leads us, and pushes us forward. And I think that's really huge for him.
Keith, obviously Harden's huge. The next people are like, okay, you didn't get Harden. Who's next? Which big names are you keeping an eye on? We're so early in the season. For a trade of that magnitude to already happen is kind of out of the ordinary. But who is next? If you're Philly, if you're Boston, who apparently, just didn't have interest in Harden because they didn't want the chemistry issues. But if you're Boston, if you're Philly, who are you targeting?
Yeah, and that's, the thing in the NBA, right? We're never far away from the next one. And you're absolutely right. It is early. A quarter of the league, a little bit more than that, almost a third, can't even be traded right now because it's February 6th. Is really when trade season opens. The trade deadline's still 2.5 months away. It's towards the end of March. So I think the next guys you're keeping an eye on are Bradley Beal. There is a sense he has been the good soldier there in Washington. He wants to win with the Wizards. He doesn't want to be traded. That's where he wants to be. But that's going to come to a head eventually there, as that team just doesn't look like they're going to get better anytime soon. Then your next piece is, as you look at it, is a guy like Andre Drummond. Now the Cavs have their center of the future in Jared Allen. Do they need Andre Drummond? He's an expiring contract. Can you move on from him? And then as you start to look around, guys like Al Horford, George Hill, the veteran-type guys, can teams talk themselves there. But the real true superstar, Bradley Beal, is the next name that everybody's going to be looking at. And then if they don't get better and better soon, it'll turn into Karl Anthony Towns with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Will be the next guy mentioned, because that's just life in the NBA.
Wow. Karl Anthony Towns, that would be interesting. Him and Embiid on the same team together. That would be a nice one. How about that? A little fist fight every night of the week. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. So I know, again, we just talked about how early it is, but, I don't think people thought Toronto was going to struggle as bad as they are. But when you look at this Eastern Conference, has your mind changed at all over what we've seen through the first 2 weeks?
A little bit, not at the top as much. I thought, it was pretty wide open. But Toronto, definitely that's been a, negative surprise there. And I don't know that they're going to get it back. They are facing, the most difficult season of anybody. They're completely away from home all year. I just don't know how they get back to being, the team that, we thought that they might, ultimately be. So that is definitely, something to keep an eye on there. But I think at the top, the East teams that are good are still, the teams you think. Miami, I'm a little less sold on. Now I think, they might have been a product of the bubble a little bit more than we thought. But, yeah, it's definitely going to be, between Milwaukee, Boston, Philadelphia, and, of course, Brooklyn. And I think Indiana, it should be in that mix as well.
All right, Keith Smith, every week right here, we talk NBA on the Sports Bash. Follow him at Keith Smith NBA. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Keith, we always appreciate you, pal.
I thank you guys. I appreciate it. You all stay safe, you and yours.
All right, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He'll be back next week with us. We'll talk more on the NBA.